You know, one of the many reasons why I love being a part of the Scoop Duck community as part of the On3 network and part of the Scoop Duck message board community is sometimes I draw inspiration. Sometimes I get inspiration for segments and topics right here on TSOW, and this segment is one of those instances. There was a poster on there about a week ago, 2 weeks, something like that, not too long ago, that posted Dan Lanning versus Chip Kelly. Has Dan Lanning surpassed Chip even right now, 3 years in? If he hasn't, what does he have to do to be able to get there? And there were a varying amount of perspectives on this, and now I wanted to share my perspective onto this as well, because right now I think these are certainly two of the best coaches in the history of Oregon Duck football. Of course, you can't forget about Rich Brooks, the guy who the Autzen Stadium field bears his name. Of course, the legendary Mike Bellotti certainly has to be thrown in there as well. But Dan Lanning and Chip Kelly are certainly ones that stand in that upper echelon of Oregon Duck football coaches. You know, when I was doing the research and preparing for this segment, I knew Chip Kelly only was the head coach for 4 years of this Duck football program, and Dan Lanning, as I said prior, has only been here for 3 years. So I'm like, let's take the first 3 seasons of Chip Kelly and Dan Lanning, and this will be a common thread throughout this segment. It's tough. It's tough to compare both of these guys. Like, Chip was the offensive coordinator under Mike Bellotti, so he kind of had something that he was building, or a part of what he was building beforehand for when he became head coach in 2009. Dan Lanning, of course, was the defensive coordinator at Georgia, so he kind of came in a little bit brand new after Mario Cristobal. We're talking about 2 different eras. Like, Chip was operating, 10 years before NIL and portal, and Dan Lanning is in the heat. He's in the middle of the NIL and portal era. So these are 2 different coaches, very different coaches, I think, in their personalities, 2 different eras, but still, I think that's kind of what makes this a little bit interesting and certainly fun to talk about. Would love to hear your perspectives certainly on this as well. But let's kind of come back to the first 3 seasons for both these head coaches, and it is eerily similar. Dan Lanning, 35-6 throughout his first 3 seasons. Chip Kelly, 34-6 throughout his first 3 seasons. Now, Chip won 3 Pac titles. 2, I think, in the Pac-10, and I think 1 after Colorado and Utah joined when they were the Pac-12 at that point. Chip has that BCS title game appearance. And Dan Lanning, of course, hasn't been to that championship type of atmosphere and type of game, we know. Now, Dan did win the Big Ten title last year, and I think that counts. Like, that Big Ten championship in the Power 2 and the Super Conference era, winning the conference title in year 1 in the league, I think that is that almost counts as 2 Pac titles, almost, in my opinion. I really believe that. I think, like, winning a conference championship, being at the top of your league, is going to be very difficult for a lot of programs to be able to maintain that year after year after year. I believe Oregon is certainly a program that can maintain that level of excellence, but to be able to come in, not only win the conference title, but within Big Ten play and not in the college football playoff. How about just running the table? 10-0, beating Ohio State, beating Penn State. I know Michigan was down, but still beating Michigan State. Like, they were, I think, the first team maybe in Big Ten history to beat every single one of those teams, those 4 teams, during one Big Ten football season. I know it was an extremely sour end to last year, but I think we're going to look back on this. Maybe 2 years down the line, maybe 3 years down the line. I think for some people, maybe now they can look back on it. That was a hell of an accomplishment in year 1 in a conference. And when you switch, especially at these higher levels of football, like the Big Ten and the SEC, when you pivot conferences, it's not easy. It took Penn State a couple of years from when they joined the Big Ten to be able to have their big year, but Oregon just said, year 1, undefeated. And I think that is a huge accomplishment on the resume, certainly for Dan Lanning. I believe when it comes to resume, I believe Chip Kelly holds a little bit of a slight edge. Okay, we talk about Dan falling a little bit short in 2022, falling a little bit short in 2023 to those conference titles and possible college football playoff opportunities, which would have been possible national championship opportunities. Chip Kelly in 2010 was able to get there. So I think from a resume perspective, I think a slight edge needs to be able to go to Chip, but I think that's maybe just one part and one piece of the puzzle that this really entails. Let's talk about recruiting, because I think those people that are sitting there right now, I think one of the big things, if they're pro Lanning and they're taking Dan Lanning in this discussion, I think a lot of it is recruiting based. Oregon is recruiting easily the best that they've recruited in the history of their program. We know Chip hated recruiting, hates recruiting, and will hate recruiting. There's a reason why he left UCLA to become the OC. He wanted to just lock himself in a room and watch film. There's a reason why he's in the NFL right now with the Las Vegas Raiders. You look at Chip from a recruiting perspective. In 2009, they were ranked 46th, and then 2010 through 2012, you're talking about 18th, 14th, and 18th. So hanging around like just barely in that top 15 type of discussion from a talent acquisition perspective. The elite level that Dan has been able to recruit, I think, ensures that elite type of future. We don't know what the future would have been like for Chip going forward. You got to think that maybe if he would have stayed at Oregon, I still think that they would have had certainly a lot of success, but it ensures it. It almost locks it in with the type of talent that Dan is being able to get. Like Chip went out there, he got good players at the top of the recruiting class. Of course, DeAnthony Thomas was one. I think he was a 5-star type, maybe like a top 10 overall player in the class of 2011. Eric Armstead was a player in the defensive line in 2012 that I believe was highly rated. I know Marcus Mariota wasn't highly rated coming out of high school, a 3-star guy, but we all know almost immediately, right, what Marcus Mariota really turned into, the greatest Duck of all time, the only Heisman Trophy winner of all time. But like the blue chip ratio for Chip Kelly's types of teams, that's 4- and 5-star guys, it's like 50-50, like right around 50%. I mean, Dan's he's above 80% right now. Almost all of his guys are 4- and 5-star guys, which I think goes into another point that I want to make. I think Dan's program compared to Chip's program, I think it's a more well-rounded program. I think Dan and the Ducks are better in the trenches than they certainly have ever been before. Defensively, I think this is as good as Oregon has been, maybe consistently, or how they're building their defense, how they're recruiting, and the results on the field and what they've been able to do. Defensively, I think this is as close to good as they've ever been. I mean, when you look at Chip, the big thing that he has that is going to be on his resume forever, that is going to be absolutely timeless, is his influence on the game of football, not only college football, but you see some of these zone read and these shotgun option type of concepts. They've made their way to the National Football League and throughout all areas of football. And then when you look at Oregon specifically, they in 2001, Joey Harrington, that was a great year, winning the Fiesta Bowl. I think they finished second or third in the polls that year. 2007, we know that was really slated to be a really good year before Dennis Dixon got hurt, and they had years, but to be able to consistently win double-digit games and be in that conversation, whether it was for a conference title or maybe be in the national title type of conversation, Oregon hadn't really tasted that before. And Chip was able to bring that. Chip was able to elevate the Oregon Ducks football program consistently to that level where now they're in the national conversation. When you ask people about Oregon football, you look at uniforms, you look at that high-tempo offense. And Chip brought that high-tempo offense and had it succeed and really revolutionized and changed the game of football. And he changed how people look at the Oregon Ducks football program and what level that the Oregon Ducks football program is on and where they have been on going forward ever since he departed Eugene following the 2012 season. July 16th, 2025, Lanning versus Kelly. Who do I believe should maybe be atop of that conversation? Look, when you talk about Dan, you can talk about his recruiting. You can talk about how well-rounded his teams are. And I think if someone can deliver a national championship to the Oregon Ducks, it's Dan Lanning. And I believe this team is better these teams are better in a lot more spots, and it's just deeper and a much more talented and well-rounded type of program than it was in any era, which includes the Chip Kelly era. All of that being said about Dan, when it comes to, I think, accomplishments at these times during their careers, when it comes to the influence on football, when it comes to the influence on Oregon right now, I think you got to give the edge, slight edge, certainly right now to Chip Kelly as of this point in time. Like, as a play caller, Chip was just, and he proved it last year at Ohio State. We'll see if he proves it in the NFL with the Las Vegas Raiders. But man, as a play caller, he had such a fantastic ability of setting certain things up and really thinking so far ahead. Oregon, Ohio State, and some of these other stops, you've seen it. You've seen it from Chip, and he is just an offensive mastermind. And he will certainly go down as one of the true revolutionary guys and revolutionary minds throughout the history of football. What does Dan need to do to be able to get to that level? I think it's simple. You at least got to get to a national championship, because then you equal that of which Chip Kelly was able to do in 2010 with that team. If Dan can get to that level, and I think the other thing is longevity. If he can maintain, Dan is extremely bought in. He's extremely bought in to this Oregon football program. And if you see Dan 7, 8 years, he's 10 years down the line, whereas Chip was just 4 years as the head coach, and maybe he's got a national championship within that as well, people are going to look at Dan Lanning as being statue-worthy. When I'm 6 feet under and it's 60 years or 70 years maybe down the line, I think we're going to look at these two guys as certainly some of the best to ever do it in the history of Oregon Duck football.